Hey everybody, Some Gadget Guy here, and I've got a little comparison here set up for the Lumia 2520 against the Microsoft Surface 2. Now, you guys should know by now, I am not a fan of those gadget versus gadget showdown fight comparisons, because often it's just like, oh, this one has this specs on it, and this one has this specs on it, and this one has these megapixels, and this one has this gigaflops, and that's not fun. I don't enjoy that. You guys can look up online, read the specs off the side of the box, and get a really good sense of what each gadget brings to the table hardware-wise. But having used both of these tablets for a couple months now, I wanted to talk just a little bit more about the nuance of where Nokia's approach went versus where Microsoft's approach went with Surface. Been getting into a couple conversations recently with other techies and other gadget bloggers who have very solid opinions on both of these tablets, even though most of them haven't played with both. It's either one or the other, and I got into a big old argument with someone who had obviously not used either. So I wanted to share some of my experiences looking at both the Surface 2 and the Lumia 2520. So right off the bat, in terms of just pure bang for buck features, the Lumia becomes a very attractive proposition. Both of these tablets feature a 1080p screen, which I think we can all agree Windows 8 looks a little silly in portrait, but this was the easiest way for me to set up the shot. We have a 10.1-inch diagonal on the 2520 and a 10.6-inch diagonal on the Surface 2, which means that this does have the slightly nicer pixel pitch as they both have the same resolution, but that's a really scientific criticism because when put side by side, they both do an equally good job of displaying content. Now, while the 2520 does have the brighter screen and it's a little bit easier to read outdoors, I actually like the color on the Surface 2 just a little bit better. I find that you should be able to see that the whites get very warm on the 2520, and they don't get jaundiced, but there's a slightly yellow tint, a slightly warmer, slightly oversaturated color effect happening on the 2520, and I like even though it looks a little cooler, it looks a little colder, I like the slightly more accurate color info on the Surface 2. To attain this brighter experience, this brighter screen, I find that there's a lot more backlight bleed on the edges of the screen on the 2520 than there are on the edges of the screen on the Surface 2. And that really became a defining experience between these two tablets. For $50 more, you can get a tablet that has 4G LTE data. I'm currently using it on AT&T. I've had excellent experiences. AT&T's network has been improving radically in my neck of the woods. And it's got a slightly nicer camera. It's got the slightly brighter screen. It's got NFC built into it for tap and share, tap and pair functionality. And those are all very, very good things. But you can see where adding all of that extra hardware for only $50 more means they have had to make a few smaller compromises in other areas. The 2520 has front-firing stereo speakers, and the Surface 2 has side-firing stereo speakers. Now, I prefer the speakers to be pointed right at my face, but the speakers on the Surface 2 are actually slightly nicer than the front-facing speakers on the 2520. And it's a little harder for me to do a direct comparison because if I set up mics, I'm gonna point a mic at the screen and the Surface 2 is going to sound quieter, but I think that the actual audio experience on the Surface 2 is slightly higher quality than the audio experience on the Nokia. One of my favorite recent criticisms was someone who was really upset that the Surface 2 came with a Tegra 4 processor, while the 2520 was obviously the superior choice with its Qualcomm 800 series processor. I haven't found any significant difference in performance. You go with the Qualcomm because you've got 4G data built into this tablet, so you need a chipset which has, native support for 4G radio. The Tegra 4 doesn't, so, Microsoft put that in because it was the first next generation mobile ARM processor that they could get their hands on when they were re-upping the specs on the Surface 2. So like if I hit this Halo app at the same time, chances are if there is an advantage, we're talking about seconds, not, noticeable drag or lag. So I'm gonna hit them at the same time. I haven't tried this, so I might be proven completely wrong here right now. They both pop up the splash screen at the same time. Microsoft Studios hits at the same time. In fact, the Surface 2 killed it just a little bit faster. 343 Industries, same time. Boot, Vanguard, same time. I mean, guys, if there is an advantage, one or the other, you're not going to be able to detect it. I mean, this is... Actually, the Surface 2 pulled up my start button just a little bit faster. So boom, Tegra for gaming, bam, you just got served by probably 2 whole tenths of a second. And that's the kind of stuff that really drives me crazy about how we discuss technology, guys. When we get really antsy about, on a spec sheet, this is obviously superior than this. There are plenty of reasons why I think someone might still consider the Surface 2 over the 2520. Now, I named the 2520 my Windows tablet of last year because I did value that extra value add of having 4G data and that the price discrepancy between the two was only $50. Now, having used these two together, though, the Surface brings some interesting alternatives that I really wish Nokia had considered, not the least of which is build quality. We discussed the backlight bleed, but we're still talking about a tablet that's made out of plastic versus a tablet which is made out of injection molded magnesium. And this is an area that I find all of my best fanboy geeky pals tend to overlook, is that I am willing to spend a little bit more for a nicer build experience. You feel like this thing can take some bumps and bruises. Now, the satiny finish on the 2520 is very attractive. And I'm not saying that plastic isn't a good material to build out of. I mean, Nokia has pioneered high quality polycarb as a build for phones and now for tablets. But we've got to get over this. Well, they've got similar specs, so they should be the same price, or this should be cheaper because it doesn't have the 4G LTEs and the NFCs. No, this is a much more expensive material to build something out of. Combine that with the fact that there is the extra engineering involved in building in this kickstand. And let me tell you, the kickstand provides tremendous benefit for those times where you're trying to use, your Surface in different scenarios, like propping it up on a table. Or I do that thing where I'm lying down on the couch and I kind of balance this thing on my chest so that I can watch Netflix while my wife's watching TV if I don't want to be watching the same thing as her at the same time. This is a material which costs more than plastic. So there needs to be some price adjustments between the two, combined with the fact that Microsoft's magnetic clip-in tray here is phenomenal, and that the charge port, also being magnetic, requires a different kind of engineering, a different quality of engineering, and is a much, much nicer experience than the plug port that we have on the 2520. I am not a fan of how this plugs in, and I worry that if my tablet were to ever take a drop while this thing was plugged in, it would snap off the little arm that goes in there. I don't have that concern on a Surface where that's gonna pop right out. And in fact, my dog has knocked this off of our coffee table, and what's the first thing that happens? The charge port pops off. Everything's fine, everything's cool. You don't have to worry about this getting damaged. And there are some interesting ergonomic aspects to consider between these two tablets too. I think the tapering edges on the 2520 are very attractive, and they do help this tablet feel slimmer, that when you're holding it, it is easier to hold on to. But that means we have this really obnoxious USB 3 mini port to contend with if we want to add peripherals and accessories. The harder edged lines on the Surface 2 make it feel like an older Lenovo or IBM style product. It's a little bit more corporate feeling. It's a little less organic. It's a little less consumer fun friendly, but that gives us space to put in things like this really sweet full-sized USB 3 port that you can connect peripherals and accessories to really easily. You know what? Guys, I'm willing to pay a little bit more just so that I don't have to buy an adapter cable for a USB peripheral. That is a benefit for me. It's one less thing to keep track of, it's one less thing to lose. So we can keep playing that game all day long. This tablet is a little easier to take outside thanks to the brighter screen and the 4G data if you need to work a little bit more on the go. But the Surface 2 is going to be easier to connect accessories and peripherals to, going to be less things to keep track of. You won't need to buy some extra stand solution if you want to prop it up laptop style. And there's way more accessory support for things like clip-in keyboards. And I did a review on the Surface Music Kit, which will hopefully be sold retail soon, so that you can do other things too, like use your Surface 2 or your Surface Pro as some kind of music editing solution. And this is why I think gadget versus gadget showdown, fight, comparison videos are so useless. Because at the end of the day, you really just need to look at what specs make the most sense for you and how certain things can fit into your workflow while balancing the compromises that you're willing to live with. You're not gonna get a sense of that if all I do is read the specs off the side of the box, because the specs don't tell you the whole story. And there are compromises to be made on both sides. If we can't acknowledge that these are slightly different experiences for slightly different consumers and they solve slightly different problems while sharing 95% of the same DNA, well then where are we gonna be in 5 years tiers when everything should just be the same. So folks, I hope you have enjoyed my cranky little rant. I do enjoy a good cranky "this is why you're wrong" rant on the YouTubes. But this was a topic I wanted to address as it has been coming up a lot for me personally as I describe my experiences using these tablets, and other people have been all too happy to express to me why one is better than the other or why both suck. And those criticisms seem to come the most from people who have not used both of these products. So if there are specific questions that you've had about one or the other of these tablets or both of these tablets, how they stack up against each other, drop me a comment down at the bottom. I am all too happy to go over product and feature sets and to have, just a slightly more nuanced discussion on how these things can fit into workflow or how they can fit into our daily lives, aside from just benchmarking them and showing you some game app running on camera. As always, folks, thanks so much for watching, for subscribing, for commenting on my videos, for sharing my videos. You guys have been really good to me. I definitely appreciate over the last couple months just how involved you all have been in discussing technology with me, because that's what's really fun, is getting into some fun debates and getting into some fun conversations. And that makes me super glad that I am doing all this stuff on the YouTubes. And as always, I will catch you all on the next video.